Have you ever wondered why, despite promising yourself never again, you end up in relationships that hurt you over and over? You're not alone. Today we're going to dive into the brilliant mind of Carl Jung to discover why we repeat these painful relationship patterns and, more importantly, how we can break this cycle once and for all. Think about it for a moment. How many times have you said, "This person is different," only to find yourself months later with the same tears, the same anguish, and that all-too-familiar emptiness? Jung had an explanation for this, and I assure you that once you understand it, your love life will never be the same again. Jung discovered that we don't consciously choose these destructive relationships. It's our unconscious that drags us toward them, seeking to resolve deep wounds that perhaps we don't even know we have. This is what he called the shadow, that part of ourselves that we hide even from ourselves, but which secretly governs our most important decisions. When we don't recognize our shadow, when we ignore those wounded parts that live within us, we're doomed to seek in others what we haven't resolved within ourselves. And here's the painful irony: the more we refuse to know our shadow, the more powerfully it pushes us toward relationships that reflect exactly what we refuse to see. Have you noticed that your partners, though physically different, end up making you feel the same pain? Jung explained that this happens because we unconsciously seek situations that reactivate our childhood wounds. If as a child you learned that love comes with abandonment, your unconscious will seek people who will eventually abandon you, not because you enjoy suffering, but because your psyche is desperately trying to heal that original wound. This is the key to why toxic relationships feel so intense, so special. It's not true love you're experiencing, it's your unconscious recognizing the familiar pattern it has been seeking. It's as if a part of you is saying, "There it is, that person can finally give me what I missed in childhood." But the tragic thing is that this person cannot heal your wound because that healing can only come from yourself. Jung called this phenomenon projection. We project onto our partner both the best and worst of ourselves, especially that which we don't want to recognize. And so, instead of seeing the real person in front of us, we see through the filter of our own wounds, fears, and unresolved expectations. Think about your last painful relationship. How much of what initially attracted you later became your greatest source of suffering? Perhaps you fell in love with their independence, only to later feel abandoned. Or you were captivated by their emotional intensity, only to be exhausted by their ups and downs. Jung would say that what we admire and what hurts us are often two sides of the same coin, two aspects of our own psyche seeking integration. It's easy to blame our ex-partners, to say they deceived us by showing one facet at the beginning and revealing another later. But the truth, according to Jung, is much deeper. We see what we need to see in each stage of our unconscious process. First, we project our ideal. Then, when this illusion crumbles, we project our deepest fears and wounds. Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves, Jung said. Every person who has hurt you is showing you a part of yourself that you've been avoiding confronting. This is a difficult truth to accept, but it's the first step toward liberation. So, how do we break this cycle? Jung offered us a path: individuation. This process begins when we stop looking in others for what we must find in ourselves. When we understand that no one else can complete us, heal our wounds, or give us the value we don't give ourselves, the first step is to recognize your shadow. Those parts of you that you've denied, repressed, or judged. Jealousy, dependency, fear of abandonment, need for control. All those aspects you prefer not to see in yourself, but which emerge intensely in your relationships. Jung taught us that we cannot transform what we are not willing to confront. Ask yourself, what pattern has repeated in your relationships? What painful emotion appears again and again? Maybe you always feel ignored, or perhaps you constantly feel suffocated. Whatever the pattern, it's not a coincidence. It's your unconscious trying to bring to light something that needs to be healed. Once you identify these patterns, the next step is even harder. You must take responsibility. Not to blame yourself, but to empower yourself. As long as you blame others for your pain, you'll continue to be a victim of the same circumstances. Jung firmly believed that only by accepting our participation in these patterns can we begin to transform them. This doesn't mean you should tolerate abuse or justify mistreatment. It means you must honestly ask yourself, why did I choose this person? What did I see in them that resonated with me? What signals did I ignore? What unconscious need was I trying to satisfy? Jung taught us that within us exist masculine and feminine aspects, what he called animus and anima. When these aspects are imbalanced or haven't been properly integrated, we tend to seek in our partners what we haven't developed in ourselves. A man who hasn't connected with his emotional sensitivity, his anima, may feel irresistibly attracted to extremely emotional women, only to later feel overwhelmed by that very quality. Similarly, a woman who hasn't developed her assertiveness and determination, her animus, may be attracted to dominant men, only to later feel suffocated by that same dominance. The initial attraction is powerful precisely because we're seeing parts of ourselves that we yearn to integrate. This brings us to another fundamental concept of Jung's: archetypes. These are universal patterns that reside in our collective unconscious and shape how we experience love. The wounded lover, the nurturing mother, the savior, the protective warrior. All these archetypes can be activated in our romantic relationships, especially when we're not aware of their influence. For example, if you grew up with an absent or emotionally distant father, you might unconsciously activate the savior archetype in your relationships, looking for someone to fix or complete, thus repeating the pattern of emotional emptiness you experienced in childhood. Or perhaps you activate the nurturing mother archetype, attracting partners who need to be taken care of, but who can never return that same care to you. Jung observed that these patterns are not accidental. They are attempts by our psyche to achieve wholeness, to integrate fragmented parts of ourselves. The problem is not that these patterns exist, but that we act from them unconsciously, repeating the same painful script over and over, expecting a different ending. This is where Jung's concept of synchronicity comes in. Have you noticed how, when you finally begin to work on yourself, the people you attract also change? This is no coincidence. Jung believed there is a profound connection between our inner world and the external circumstances we experience. When we transform our relationship with ourselves, we also transform the type of relationships we attract. Think about it. Every time you've grown internally, haven't you also noticed a change in the people who come into your life? This happens because you no longer need to project your unresolved parts onto others. You no longer unconsciously seek someone who will reactivate your wounds because you're in the process of healing them yourself. Jung taught us that the true purpose of relationships is not to complete us, but to reveal us to ourselves. Each person we love becomes a mirror that shows us both our light and our shadow. And although this process can be painful, it is also the path to deeper authenticity and truly satisfying relationships. But how do we concretely apply these teachings to stop repeating painful loves? Jung offered us several powerful tools. The first is dialogue with the unconscious. Through deep introspection, meditation, dream analysis, or reflective writing, we can begin to communicate with those parts of ourselves that have been silently directing our romantic choices. Ask yourself, what do my past relationships teach me about myself? What message has my unconscious been trying to convey to me through these painful experiences? The second tool is the integration of opposites. Jung believed that the psyche constantly seeks balance. If we identify too much with being strong and independent, our unconscious will push us toward situations where we experience vulnerability and dependence. Instead of resisting these opposites, we need to integrate them, recognizing that we are complex beings capable of containing multiple, seemingly contradictory truths. In your relationships, this means recognizing that you can be both strong and vulnerable, both independent and in need of connection. You don't have to choose one extreme. Psychological health lies in the integration of both. The third tool, perhaps the most powerful, is the acceptance of the shadow. Jung taught us that the more we reject something in ourselves, the more forcefully it will manifest in our lives. If you deny your need for affection, you'll attract partners who make you feel lacking. If you deny your tendency to control, you'll attract people who make you feel powerless. The paradox is beautiful. When we accept our darkest parts, they lose their power over us. They no longer need to manifest dramatically in our relationships because they've found a place in our consciousness. Think about someone who constantly attracts partners who betray them. If this person could recognize and accept their own capacity for betrayal, not to act on it, but to recognize it as part of the human experience, they would no longer unconsciously project this quality onto others, and therefore would not attract people who embody this projection. This is deep work that requires brutal honesty with yourself. It requires you to look beyond the narrative that you simply have bad luck in love and ask yourself, what am I unconsciously seeking in these relationships? What need am I trying to satisfy? What wound am I trying to heal? Once you begin this process of self-knowledge, something extraordinary happens. You become more selective. You no longer fall for just anyone who activates your old patterns. You begin to distinguish between the intense chemistry that arises from projection and the genuine connection that arises from mutual recognition. Jung described this as the difference between falling in love, which is primarily projection, and conscious love, which arises when we can see the other person as they truly are, separate from our needs and projections. This doesn't mean that conscious love lacks passion or intensity. On the contrary, it has a depth and authenticity that simple infatuation can never achieve. It's a love that doesn't seek to complete you, but to celebrate your completeness. It doesn't seek to rescue you, but to accompany you. It doesn't seek to define you, but to discover you. But reaching this point requires courage. The courage to look at yourself honestly, to give up the fantasy that someone else can save you from yourself. The courage to take responsibility for your own growth and healing. Jung reminded us that no one can be conscious of their individuality unless they are intimately and responsibly related to their fellow beings. In other words, our relationships are the ground where we discover who we truly are, where our unconscious parts become visible, where our deepest wounds have the opportunity to heal. Every relationship, even the most painful ones, contains a seed of growth. The question is, are you willing to cultivate it? Are you willing to see your relationships not just as sources of pleasure or pain, but as mirrors that show you aspects of yourself that need attention? When you begin to relate to your love experiences from this perspective, something fundamentally changes. You are no longer a victim of your patterns, but a conscious explorer of your own inner landscape. Every attraction, every conflict, every breakup becomes an opportunity to know yourself more deeply. And as this self-knowledge grows, so does your capacity for authentic love. You no longer unconsciously seek someone who embodies your projections, but someone with whom you can share a path of mutual discovery. This is the gift Jung left us. The understanding that our most painful relationships can be our most valuable teachers if we have the courage to learn their lessons. That each repetitive pattern contains a message that, once decoded, can free us from the compulsion to repeat. Jung taught us that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Your love choices are not fate, not bad luck, not simply how things are. They are the result of unconscious forces that, once illuminated by consciousness, can be transformed. Imagine for a moment what your love life would be like if you could clearly see these forces in action. If before falling in love with someone, you could distinguish between attraction based on old wounds and attraction based on possibilities for mutual growth. If you could recognize when you're projecting your unfulfilled needs onto another person instead of relating to who they really are, this clarity is possible. It doesn't require you to become an expert in Jungian psychology, but simply to cultivate an honest relationship with yourself. To be willing to question yourself, to observe yourself, to learn from each experience without judging yourself. Jung believed that this process of individuation, of becoming who you truly are, is the work of a lifetime. It's not about reaching a state of perfection where you no longer make mistakes or feel pain. It's about developing an increasingly conscious relationship with your own psyche so that your choices arise from consciousness, not from unconscious compulsion. And although this path may seem lonely at times, it actually leads you toward a deeper form of connection with others. Because only when we can relate to ourselves with honesty and compassion can we offer that same quality of presence to those we love. Jung reminded us that the meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. Every relationship has the potential to transform us, but only if we are willing to see what part of us is being activated, what reflection we are receiving, what lesson is being offered to us. So the next time you feel that intense attraction, that irresistible chemistry, stop and ask yourself, is this an opportunity to repeat an old pattern or to create a new one? Am I looking for something in this person that I should be finding in myself? Am I projecting my shadow, or do I really see who is in front of me? These questions don't diminish the magic of love, they deepen it. They don't reduce the intensity of the connection, they make it more authentic. Because true love, according to Jung, is not the fusion of two incomplete people, but the meeting of two beings in the process of becoming complete. And now I invite you to reflect. What patterns have you noticed in your relationships? What wounds do you continue to try to heal through others? What aspects of yourself have you been projecting onto your partners? There are no right or wrong answers. There is only the journey of discovery, the commitment to your own truth, the willingness to see what has been hidden. And in that seeing, in that awareness, lies the seed of your liberation. Because in the end, as Jung taught us, the painful loves we repeat are not punishments or coincidences. They are invitations to a deeper awakening, to a richer understanding of who we are and what we truly long for. And when we accept this invitation, when we do the inner work that no external relationship can do for us, something wonderful happens. We free ourselves from the need to repeat the same painful pattern over and over again. We open ourselves to new possibilities, to connections that nourish instead of drain, that expand instead of limit, that celebrate instead of diminish. This is the gift I offer you today. The understanding that your past relationships, however painful they may have been, contain the keys to your liberation. That within every broken heart there is a lesson waiting to be learned. And that by learning those lessons, you not only transform your love life, but you move one step closer to the person you are meant to be. Jung reminded us that your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes. It's time to awaken, to look not only at who you have loved, but why you have loved them. Not only what has hurt you, but what part of you needs healing. This awakening is not the end of love, but its true beginning. It's not the death of romance, but its deepening. It's not giving up on connection, but discovering what authentic connection really means. And though this path may seem challenging, remember that you are not alone. Every human being is on this same journey, though not all are aware of it. Each person you meet is, like you, seeking to understand their patterns, heal their wounds, find their way to authentic love. This understanding unites us. It reminds us of our shared humanity, our shared vulnerability, our shared longing for true connection. And in that unity, we find not only the strength to do our own inner work, but also the compassion to accompany others on theirs. I invite you to share this video with someone who might be repeating painful patterns in their relationships. Someone who wonders why, despite their best intentions, they keep finding themselves in the same kind of love situations. Your act of sharing could be the catalyst someone needs to begin their own journey of discovery. Leave in the comments what pattern you've identified in your relationships from this video. What new understanding have you gained about your past choices? What are you willing to do differently from now on? Your experience is not only valuable for your own growth, but can illuminate the path for others who are going through similar situations. In this community, we learn together, grow together, transform together. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, and hit the notification bell. Each week, we explore together these deep territories of self-knowledge, healing, and personal growth. And believe me, there's much more to discover. Remember that, as Jung said, knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom. And part of that self-knowledge is understanding why we love as we love, why we choose who we choose, and how we can transform those patterns to create a love life that reflects not our wounds, but our capacity to love consciously. Thank you for joining me on this journey, for your openness, your curiosity, your willingness to look beyond the surface. The fact that you're here, listening to these words, already says a lot about your commitment to your own growth. And that commitment, that courage to look within, is the first step toward transforming your relationships. I'll see you in the next video, where we'll continue exploring together these fascinating territories of the human soul. Until then, remember, the love you seek outside can only be found first within yourself. And when you find it there, your entire world will change.